The email had arrived at 6:47 p.m. on a Sunday, and Eleanor had read it 17 times since. Welcome to the executive briefing tomorrow at 9 a.m. The new division head will be presenting his vision for Q3. Your presence is required. It was the kind of corporate jargon she had memorized and repeated for 30 years. Meaningless words dressed in professionalism. But her finger had hovered over the screen, tracing the name in the signature block like it was a wound she couldn't stop probing. Alexander Vance. The name meant nothing to her. It shouldn't have. But the tightness in her chest had not loosened since that moment. She told herself it was just anxiety. The company was restructuring. New leadership always brought uncertainty. At 53, Eleanor had survived 7 CEOs, for mergers, and countless young executives who thought they could teach her something about the business she had built with her own hands. She would survive this one too. The bathroom mirror stared back at her now, merciless in the morning light. She pressed a hand to her blouse, feeling the rapid beat beneath her palm. Calm down, she commanded herself. You are Eleanor Price. You do not panic. You do not tremble. You are the woman they call when deals are dying and clients are walking. You are made of steel. The woman in the mirror looked tired. That was all. Just tired. She chose her armor carefully. The navy suit with the structured shoulders. The pearl earrings her mother had given her, decades ago, in another life. Hair pinned back severely, no softness around the face. She needed to look impenetrable today. She needed to look like someone who had never made a mistake in her life. The drive to the office was a blur of grey buildings and grey sky. Chicago in November offered no comfort to anyone. She parked in her reserved spot, the one that marked her as senior leadership, and sat in the car for 3 extra minutes, watching her breath fog the windshield. 20 years. The thought arrived unbidden, as it always did. 20 years since she had held him. 20 years since she had signed the papers with shaking hands while Marcus stood in the corner of the lawyer's office, refusing to look at her. 20 years since she had walked out of that hospital room with empty arms and a heart that would never quite beat right again. She had been 33. Young enough to start over, old enough to know better. They had told her it was the right choice. They had told her she couldn't raise a child alone, not with her career, not with the divorce pending, not with the shame of it all still fresh. They had told her he would have a better life. 2 parents. A home in the suburbs. Stability. She had believed them. Or she had pretended to, which was the same thing. The elevator ride to the 42nd floor felt longer than usual. She watched the numbers climb, and with each floor, she repeated her mantra. You are Eleanor Price. You are made of steel. The executive floor was buzzing with an energy she hadn't seen in months. Assistants hurried past with coffee trays and binders. Conversations hummed in clusters near the windows. The new division head had arrived, and everyone wanted to see him, to be seen by him, to position themselves favorably in the new hierarchy. Eleanor walked through them like a ship cutting through water. She didn't slow. She didn't glance left or right. Her office was at the end of the hall, and she needed to deposit her bag, check her notes, and prepare herself for the briefing. She almost made it. Eleanor. The voice stopped her. Not because it was loud, but because it was familiar. Not the voice itself. She had never heard this voice before, but something in its cadence. The way it shaped her name. Soft. Respectful. Curious. She turned. The man standing outside the corner office, her corner office, the one she had occupied for 6 years before the restructuring, was young. Early 30s, maybe. Tall, with broad shoulders that seemed slightly out of place on someone who still had the face of a boy. Dark hair, neatly cut. A suit that fit him perfectly, expensive but not flashy. But it was his eyes that held her. They were brown. Warm brown. The kind of brown that looked almost amber in certain light. Her mother's eyes. The same shape, the same depth, the same way they crinkled slightly at the corners when he smiled, which he was doing now. A friendly smile. A polite smile. The smile of a new boss greeting a valued employee. Eleanor's blood turned to ice. Alex Vance, he said, extending his hand. I'm sorry we haven't met properly yet. The first week has been a blur of meetings and paperwork. She stared at his hand. The shape of his fingers. The way his thumb curved slightly outward at the knuckle. She knew that hand. She had traced it once, when it was small enough to curl around her finger. When it had gripped her thumb with a strength that had made her laugh through her tears. Say something. Move. Take his hand. Be normal. Eleanor Price, she heard herself say. Her voice sounded distant, like it belonged to someone else. She took his hand. His grip was firm, confident, warm. She wanted to hold on. She wanted to never let go. She dropped it after 1 second, 2 seconds, an eternity. Price, he repeated, and something flickered in his eyes. Recognition? No. Just professional interest. You've been with the company for 30 years, right? Started in accounting. She nodded. She couldn't speak. I've been reading the files, he continued, apparently unaware that she was barely breathing. Your name comes up a lot. Every major deal in the last decade, you were involved. The McKinsey acquisition. The European expansion. You're something of a legend around here. A legend. If he only knew. If he only knew that the legend standing before him had once held him in the dark hours of the night, singing lullabies she had made up on the spot. If he only knew that she had chosen his name, Benjamin, she had wanted to name him Benjamin, before she had even seen his face. Thank you, she managed. The words felt like stones in her mouth. I'm looking forward to working with you, he said, and his smile widened. It was a genuine smile. She could see it in the way it reached his eyes. He had no idea. Not a single clue. To him, she was just an employee. A senior employee, yes. Respected. Valued. But still just a name on an org chart. I have a feeling I'm going to need your experience more than I'd like to admit. My experience. What experience did she have that mattered now? What skill had she mastered that could prepare her for this, standing in front of her own son, pretending she didn't know the scent of his newborn skin, pretending she hadn't wondered every single day for 20 years if he was safe, if he was happy, if he ever thought about her. 9 o'clock briefing, she said. It was the only thing she could think to say. The only safe thing. Right. I'll see you in there. He nodded, still smiling, and turned back toward his office. Her office. The one with the view of the lake that she had loved. He walked inside like he belonged there. Because he did. He was the division head now. He was her boss. Eleanor stood in the hallway for a long moment, frozen. People passed her, murmured greetings, but she didn't hear them. She was somewhere else. She was in a hospital room in Evanston, 20 years ago, holding a 7-pound miracle, knowing she had to let him go. She was signing papers with tears blurring the ink. She was walking out into a cold November morning, just like this one, with empty arms and a future that stretched ahead like a desert. She made it to her office. She closed the door. She sat down in her chair and stared at the wall without seeing it. He has her eyes. He has her mother's eyes. He has no idea who I am. The briefing started at 9. Eleanor arrived exactly on time, as she always did. She took a seat near the back of the conference room, not her usual place at the table. She needed distance. She needed to observe without being observed. Alex stood at the head of the table, and the room quieted immediately. He had that kind of presence, the kind that commanded attention without demanding it. He clicked through his presentation with confidence, explaining his vision for the division, his plans for growth, his respect for the company's history. He was good. Better than good. He was brilliant. Eleanor watched him the way she might watch a film of a life she could have lived. She noticed every detail. The way he pushed his glasses up when he was thinking. The way he glanced at his notes, then at the room, then back at his notes. The way he said we instead of I, including everyone in his vision. And she noticed something else. Something that made her chest ache with a pain so physical she had to press her hand against her ribs to contain it. When he was nervous, and he was nervous, despite the confidence, she could see it, he tapped his pen against the notepad. 3 quick taps. Pause. 3 quick taps. Just like she did. Just like she had done for 30 years. She looked down at her own hand, resting on the table. Her pen was still. She had stopped tapping years ago, train herself out of it, because Marcus had once told her it was annoying. But here was her son, 20 years later, doing exactly the same thing. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. He doesn't know. The presentation ended. Applause rippled around the table. Alex smiled, that same warm smile, and thanked everyone for their time. Then his eyes found hers, at the back of the room, and he nodded. "Eleanor," he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "I'd love to schedule some time with you this week. Go through the historical files. Get your perspective on where we've been so I can better understand where we are going." All eyes turned to her. The new boss, acknowledging the old guard. Showing respect. Being inclusive. She nodded. "Of course. My calendar is open." It was a lie. Her calendar was never open. But for him, she would make it open. For him, she would do anything. The meeting ended. People filed out, buzzing with excitement about the new leadership, the fresh energy, the bright future. Eleanor stayed in her chair until the room was empty. Then she stood slowly, gathered her things, and walked back to her office. She closed the door. She sat down. And for the first time in 20 years, she allowed herself to weep. Not for the daughter she had been. Not for the choices she had made. But for the impossible truth of this moment. Her son was here. Her son was alive. Her son was brilliant and kind and successful, and he would never, ever know that the woman who sat in the back of the conference room, the woman with the steel spine and the navy suit, was the mother who had held him first. She was Eleanor Price. She was made of steel. But steel, she was learning, could still shatter. 3 weeks passed like water through fingers. Eleanor stopped counting the days. She started counting the moments. They were everywhere. Small. Devastating. Unavoidable. Monday morning, 8:47 a.m. She stepped out of the elevator and there he was, waiting for the same car, coffee in hand. He smiled. He said good morning. He asked if she had a good weekend. She said yes, because what else could she say? She couldn't tell him the truth. She couldn't tell him that her weekend had been consumed by thoughts of him, by the torment of knowing he was 30 miles away in some apartment she had never seen, living a life she knew nothing about. Tuesday afternoon, 2:15 p.m., a budget meeting. He sat at the head of the table, she at the opposite end. The distance felt like an ocean. He asked questions about the marketing line items, and when she answered, he listened. Really listened. His head tilted slightly, his eyes focused entirely on her, and she had to look away because the intensity of his attention felt like a physical weight. Wednesday, 11:30 a.m., the first real conversation. She was in the break room, staring at the coffee machine without seeing it, when his voice came from behind her. Tough machine to figure out. "I think it has a personal vendetta against me." She turned. He was leaning against the doorframe, holding his own empty mug, wearing that easy smile. Casual today. No jacket. Sleeves rolled to his elbows. She noticed his forearms, the shape of them, and wondered if he had inherited that from Marcus or from some stranger she would never know. "It's temperamental," she said. "You have to hold the button for exactly 3 seconds. Any less, it's weak. Any more, it burns." He stepped closer, watching as she demonstrated. 3 seconds. Got it. He made his coffee, counted carefully, and when he took the first sip, his eyes widened with genuine surprise. "That's actually drinkable. You've just improved my entire work life." She almost smiled. She caught herself. "I've been here 30 years, she said. "I've learned a few things. Like where the bodies are buried." He was joking. His eyes sparkled with it. But the question landed like a stone in her chest. "If only you knew." "Something like that," she murmured, and escaped before he could ask another question. The pattern established itself quickly. Alex sought her out. Not in an obvious way, not in a way that would raise eyebrows, but consistently. He wanted her opinion on the European accounts. He wanted her perspective on the new junior hires. He wanted to understand the company's history, and she was the keeper of it. Every interaction was a small death. She learned things about him. Piece by piece. Each fact a wound. He had grown up in Naperville. Suburbs. Good schools. His adoptive father was a dentist, his mother a teacher. He had one sister, also adopted, from Guatemala. They were close. He called her every Sunday. He had played soccer in high school. Not well, he laughed, but enthusiastically. He had gone to Northwestern on a scholarship. Business school at Chicago. He had worked at 2 other firms before this, climbing steadily, always hungry for more. He was 32 years old. 32 years, 2 months, and 11 days since she had held him. He was engaged. She learned this on a Thursday, when he mentioned, almost casually, that his fiancée was an architect. They were looking at venues for a summer wedding. He showed her a photo on his phone, a woman with red hair and a kind smile, standing next to him on a beach somewhere, and Eleanor's heart cracked in a new place. A mother should meet her son's fiancée. A mother should help plan the wedding. A mother should be there. She was nothing. She was a colleague. She was the woman who knew where the old files were stored. The watching became an obsession she couldn't control. She noticed the way he treated everyone with the same quiet respect, from the CEO to the mailroom staff. She noticed the way he remembered names, details, small things people had mentioned weeks ago. She noticed the way he stayed late, not because he had to, but because he cared. She noticed the way his face changed when he was concentrating. The slight furrow between his brows. The way he pressed his lips together. Marcus had done that too, once, before the marriage soured and the distance grew. She wondered if Alex had learned it from his adoptive father, or if it was something deeper, something coded in his bones. She noticed the way he laughed. Open, unguarded, throwing his head back slightly. It was a sound that made other people smile, made them want to be near him. She heard it sometimes, drifting from the conference room or the hallway, and each time she felt the same pull. The same desperate, impossible longing to be part of his joy. She started finding reasons to be near him. She volunteered for the projects he was leading. She rearranged her schedule to attend meetings he would be at. She walked past his office, her office, she still thought of it that way, just to catch a glimpse of him through the glass. It was pathetic. She knew it was pathetic. She was a 53-year-old woman, a senior executive, a professional with decades of hard-won dignity, and she was acting like a teenager with a crush. But it wasn't a crush. It was something far more primal. It was a mother's heart, starved for 20 years, finally allowed to be in the same room as the child that had never stopped loving. She couldn't touch him. She couldn't tell him. She couldn't do anything but watch. The Friday before Thanksgiving, everything shifted. The office was emptying early, people eager to start the holiday weekend. Eleanor was packing her bag, already dreading 4 days of solitude in her apartment, when her phone buzzed. Alex Vance, still here? I was going through some old files and found something you might want to see. Swing by if you have a minute. Her heart lurched. She typed a response before she could talk herself out of it. On my way. His office door was open. He was sitting on the edge of his desk, holding a thick folder, his tie loosened, his shirt untucked on one side. He looked tired. He looked young. He looked like someone who needed a mother to tell him to go home and rest. She stopped in the doorway. You found something. He looked up and smiled. That smile, always that smile, warm and open and utterly unaware of what it did to her. Come in. Close the door if you don't mind. It's a bit sensitive. She closed the door. Her hands were shaking. She pressed them together. He held up the folder. These are the original incorporation documents, from when the company started. I found them in a box in the archive room. No one's looked at these in decades. He flipped it open, revealing yellowed pages covered in old typewriter ink. Look at this. The original investor list. Your name is here. She moved closer. Too close. She could smell him now. Soap, coffee, something clean and young. She forced herself to look at the document. Eleanor Price. Investor. Initial capital, $15,000. She had forgotten. She had scraped together every penny she had, borrowed from her mother, sold her engagement ring, all to fund this company when it was just an idea in Marcus's head. She had believed in him then. She had believed in them. That was a long time ago, she said quietly. 15,000 in 1995 was a lot of money, Alex said. He was studying her face now, curious. You must have really believed in the vision. I believed in the person. The words slipped out before she could stop them. She meant Marcus. She meant the man she had married, the man who had stood beside her in that hospital room and told her they had no choice. But Alex didn't know that. He couldn't know that. He nodded slowly. That's even better. Believing in a person. He paused. Can I ask you something? Off the record. She nodded. She would have agreed to anything. You've been here longer than anyone. You've seen it all. What do you really think of me? Of the changes I'm making? His eyes held hers, and for a moment, he looked less like a boss and more like a boy seeking approval. Be honest. I can take it. The question hung between them. She could feel the weight of it, the vulnerability beneath his confidence. He didn't need her professional opinion. He needed something else. Something he didn't even know he was asking for. She could have told him the truth. She could have said, I think you're brilliant. I think you're kind. I think you have my mother's eyes and my nervous habits, and I have loved you since before you were born. Instead, she said, I think you're exactly what this company needs. His face softened. That means a lot. Coming from you. Coming from me. If only he knew. He stood, stretching, and suddenly they were too close. Inches apart. He looked down at her. He was taller than she had realized, taller than Marcus, and something flickered in his expression. Confusion, maybe. Or recognition of something he couldn't name. Eleanor, he said, and his voice was different. Softer. Have we ever met before? Before the company, I mean. You just seem familiar. The floor dropped beneath her. He feels it. He feels something. She should have denied it. She should have laughed it off, made a joke about having one of those faces. It was the smart move. The safe move. But she couldn't speak. She could only stare at him, frozen, while 20 years of silence screamed in her throat. Eleanor. Concern now. He reached out, touched her arm. Are you okay? His hand on her arm. His skin against hers. The first touch in 20 years. She flinched away. I'm fine, she said, too quickly. Just tired. Long week. I should go. She was moving before she finished the sentence, grabbing her bag, heading for the door. She didn't look back. She couldn't. If she looked back, she would break. Happy Thanksgiving, he called after her, confused but polite, always polite. She didn't answer. She made it to the elevator, to the lobby, to her car. She sat in the driver's seat with the engine off, watching the parking garage lights flicker, and she let the tears come. He feels it. He doesn't know why, but he feels it. The invisible cage had just become a little smaller, a little tighter, a little more impossible to escape. Because now she knew, some part of him remembered. Some part of him recognized her. And that knowledge was both the most beautiful and most terrible thing she had ever felt. December arrived with bitter cold and the kind of pressure that built slowly, invisibly, until everything threatened to crack. The Meridian deal was Alex's first major test. It had arrived on his desk 3 weeks into his tenure, a potential acquisition that would double the company's market share in Europe. The board was watching. Marcus was watching. Everyone wanted to see if the new golden boy could deliver. Eleanor watched too. But she watched differently. She watched the numbers. And what she saw made her blood run cold. It started with a footnote. Page 47 of the due diligence report, buried in a section about subsidiary liabilities. A single line referencing a legal dispute in Frankfurt that had been quietly settled 2 years ago. The settlement amount was redacted. The details were vague. But Eleanor had been doing this long enough to know when something was being hidden. She spent the weekend in her apartment, surrounded by printouts and coffee cups, tracing the threads. By Sunday night, she had the answer. The Frankfurt subsidiary had settled a patent infringement lawsuit for €7 million. The parent company, the one Alex was trying to acquire, had buried the payment in a restructuring charge. It wasn't illegal, but it was deceptive. And if the acquisition went through, that liability would become theirs. The valuation was wrong. The entire deal was built on sand. Alex was walking into a trap. She should have gone to Marcus. She should have sent an email to the legal department. She should have followed protocol, stayed in her lane, protected herself. Instead, on Monday morning, she knocked on Alex's door. He looked up from his computer, surprised. "Eleanor, I didn't expect. Is everything okay?" She closed the door behind her. "We need to talk. Off the record." His expression shifted. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit." She didn't sit. She couldn't. She placed the folder in front of him instead, opened to the page with her notes. "The Meridian deal," she said. "There's a problem." He scanned her notes, his brow furrowing. She watched his face as the realization dawned, first confusion, then concentration, then the sharp intake of breath as he understood. $7 million, he muttered, buried in restructuring. He looked up at her, and there was something new in his eyes. Respect. Gratitude. "How did you find this?" "I know where to look." She hesitated. "Alex, if this goes through as structured, the liability transfers to us. The valuation is off by at least 15%. You'd be overpaying for a company with a hidden time bomb." He leaned back in his chair, running a hand through his hair. For a moment, he looked young again. Overwhelmed. She wanted to reach out. She didn't. "I presented this to the board on Friday," he said quietly. "They loved it. Marcus loved it. The vote is scheduled for next week." "Then you need to go back to them. Show them this. Renegotiate or walk away." He stared at her for a long moment. "If I go back now, I look like I didn't do my homework. I look like I failed." "You look like someone who caught a mistake before it became a disaster." A small smile tugged at his mouth. "You sound like you've done this before." "More times than I can count." He nodded slowly, then stood. He came around the desk, closer than she expected, and for a terrifying moment she thought he might hug her. He didn't. But he put a hand on her shoulder, brief, light, professional, and said, "Thank you. Really. I owe you." "You owe me nothing. You owe me nothing, and I owe you everything, and you will never know." She smiled. It felt like breaking. The problem was Marcus. He found her 3 days later, in the hallway outside the archives. He didn't knock. He didn't announce himself. He simply appeared, blocking her path, his expression unreadable. "We need to talk." She hadn't been alone with him in years. Not since the divorce. Not since the hospital. They had learned to coexist in the same building, to attend the same meetings, to pretend the past was just a closed chapter. But now, standing in the dim light of the archive corridor, the years fell away. About what? About Alex. His voice was low. Dangerous. "About what you're doing." Her heart seized, but her face showed nothing. "I don't know what you mean." "You know exactly what I mean." He stepped closer. She stepped back. "You're protecting him. Watching him. Finding things no one else finds." His eyes bored into hers. "You think I haven't noticed? You think I don't see the way you look at him?" "Marcus." "He can never know." The words landed like a slap. She stared at him, this man she had once loved, once married, once made a child with. This man who had stood beside her in that hospital room and told her they had no choice. "You gave that right up," he continued, each word precise, deliberate. "We both did. We signed the papers. We made our choice. If you break now, if you tell him, if you let him figure it out, you will destroy him." "How?" Her voice was barely a whisper. How would the truth destroy him? Marcus's face softened for just a moment, a crack in the armor she hadn't seen in 20 years. "Because he'll want to know why. And the answer is that we weren't ready. We were young and scared and selfish, and we gave him away. That's not something you come back from. That's not something anyone forgives." The words hung between them, heavy with truth she didn't want to accept. I'm not going to tell him, she said. Good. But I'm not going to stop watching him either. He's my son, Marcus. He's been a stranger for 20 years, and now he's here, and I can't. Her voice broke. She pressed her lips together, forcing the tears back. I can't pretend he's just another executive. Marcus studied her for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I know what this is costing you. He paused. But I didn't bring him here by accident. The words took a moment to register. When they did, the floor seemed to shift beneath her. What? I brought him here. Marcus's jaw tightened. I found him, tracked him down, watched his career, made sure the headhunters knew he was the right candidate. I orchestrated this. The betrayal was so complete, so absolute, that for a moment she couldn't breathe. She stared at him, this man, this stranger she had once known, and felt something inside her finally break. Why? Because I wanted to see him. For the first time, Marcus's voice cracked. Because I'm 60 years old and I've spent 2 decades wondering if he was okay, if he was happy, if he looked like me or you or someone we'll never know. Because I couldn't die without knowing. And you thought this was the way? Bringing him here, making him our boss, forcing me to sit in meetings and pretend. I thought you deserved the chance to see him too. His eyes were wet now. I thought maybe, if he was here, if you could just see him. You thought wrong. Her voice was ice. You don't get to fix 20 years of silence by turning his life into your redemption story. You don't get to use him to ease your conscience. Marcus didn't argue. He simply nodded, accepting her anger the way he had accepted everything else in their marriage, with a distance that had always felt like abandonment. Just be careful, he said finally. If you get too close, he'll start asking questions. And once those questions start, they won't stop until he has answers. Answers neither of us can give. He walked away, leaving her standing in the dim corridor, her heart pounding, her mind racing. She tried to pull back after that. She really did. But the Meridian deal consumed everything. Alex had gone back to the board, presented the new information, and instead of looking weak, he had looked brilliant. The acquisition was renegotiated at a better price. The board was impressed. Marcus was impressed. And Alex kept coming to her. Can you look at this? What do you think about this clause? You were right about the Frankfurt thing. What else am I missing? Each question was a thread, pulling her closer. Each interaction was a step toward an edge she couldn't see. Until the night everything changed. December 17th, 9:30 p.m. A winter storm had swept through the city, dumping 8 inches of snow in 4 hours. The office was empty except for the two of them, Alex finishing the final Meridian documents, Eleanor reviewing next year's budget because going home meant sitting alone in her apartment, thinking about him. The lights flickered once, twice, then died. Darkness swallowed the floor. Emergency lights kicked in, casting long shadows, but the computers went silent, the hum of electricity replaced by the howl of wind against the windows. Eleanor stepped into the hallway. Alex was already there, phone flashlight illuminating his face. Well, he said, and there was something almost light in his voice. This is dramatic. We should wait it out. The elevators are down. Stairs will be dangerous in this weather. He nodded. My office has a couch. And I think there's a bottle of something in Marcus's desk if we are feeling rebellious. She almost smiled. Almost. They ended up in his office, sitting on opposite ends of the leather couch, emergency lights casting the room in dim orange. He found the whiskey, some expensive bottle Marcus kept for clients, and poured 2 glasses. To surviving the storm, he said, raising his. She clinked her glass against his. To surviving. They talked. About nothing. About everything. About his childhood in Naperville, his adoptive parents, his sister. About her early days at the company, the deal she'd won, the one she'd lost. About the storm outside, the city buried in snow, the strange intimacy of being trapped together. And then, softly, he asked the question she had been dreading for 20 years. Can I ask you something personal? She nodded. She couldn't speak. Earlier, When I said you seemed familiar, I wasn't just being polite. He stared into his glass, not looking at her. I've had this feeling my whole life. Like there's someone I'm supposed to know, someone I'm supposed to find. It sounds crazy. It doesn't sound crazy. He looked up. Their eyes met. The storm raged outside. The whiskey warmed her throat. And for one endless moment, she saw it in his face, the same question he had asked as an infant, wordless and profound. Who are you? Who am I? Eleanor, he said, and his voice was different now. Softer. More vulnerable. Do you have children? The question hung between them like a grenade, pin-pulled, waiting to explode. She could lie. She should lie. She had lied about everything else for 20 years. One more lie would change nothing. But his eyes were her mother's eyes, and she was so tired, and the storm kept howling, and she had been silent for so long. She opened her mouth to answer. And then he moved. Standing, stretching, reaching for the bottle to refill his glass. His elbow caught her bag on the floor beside the couch. It tipped, spilling its contents across the carpet. Wallet, keys, lipstick, notebook, and a photograph. Small, worn at the edges, held in an old-fashioned frame. Alex bent to help her gather everything. His hand reached for the photograph. He picked it up, turned it over, and froze. It was her. Younger, softer, sitting in a hospital bed, exhaustion and joy mingling on her face. And in her arms, wrapped in a white blanket, a newborn baby. His face was barely visible, just a pink cheek, a tiny fist. But the frame. It was oak, hand-carved along the edges. A small brass hinge at the top. Alex stared at it. His face went pale. I had a photograph like this, he said, his voice strange. Distant. My parents, my adoptive parents, they had one. Of me. When I was born. He looked up at her, and something was dawning in his eyes. Something terrible and inevitable. Same frame. Same old-fashioned frame. The room was silent except for the wind. Eleanor couldn't move. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't do anything but watch as her son looked at the photograph, then at her, then back at the photograph. And slowly, piece by piece, the truth began to dawn on his face. The storm raged outside, but inside the office, there was only silence. Alex held the photograph like it might shatter. His thumb traced the edge of the frame. Once, twice, 3 times. The same nervous rhythm. The same unconscious habit. Eleanor watched him, frozen, her heart pounding so hard she could feel it in her throat. 20 years of silence balanced on this single moment. 20 years of secrets, exposed by a careless elbow and a worn photograph she had never been able to throw away. This frame, Alex said slowly. His voice was strange. Careful. Like he was walking through a minefield. My mom, my adoptive mom, she told me it was special. Handmade. Someone carved it for me before I was born. He looked up, and his eyes were wet. She said it was the only thing my birth mother left with me. Eleanor's breath stopped. She remembered carving that frame. 6 months pregnant, sitting at her mother's kitchen table, working slowly because her belly made her hard to lean forward. She had burned her finger on the wood-burning tool, right here. She touched her index finger, where a small scar still remained. She had wrapped the photograph in tissue paper, placed it in the bassinet beside him, and walked away. She had never expected to see it again. That was yours, Alex whispered. It wasn't a question. You left that. For me. She couldn't speak. Couldn't nod. Couldn't do anything but stare at him, this man she had made, this stranger she had loved before he was born. He looked back at the photograph. At her younger face. At the baby in her arms. At the hospital room in the background, Evanston Hospital. She could see it now, the same pale wall she had stared at for 3 days while trying to memorize every inch of his face. Evanston, he said quietly. I was born at Evanston. My parents told me. He looked up. When were you there? The question was gentle. Terrified. He already knew the answer. He just needed to hear her say it. December, she whispered. Her voice cracked on the word. December 3rd. His face crumpled. Just slightly. Just enough for her to see the boy beneath the man. "My birthday," he said. "December 3rd. The silence returned. Heavier now. Filled with everything they couldn't say. Alex stood abruptly. Walked to the window. Stared out at the snow-covered city, his back to her. His shoulders rose and fell with each breath, and she could see him fighting for control, fighting to understand, fighting to hold himself together. She should say something. She should explain. But what explanation could there be? What words could possibly bridge the gap between a hospital room 20 years ago and this office, this storm, this moment? Why? His voice was raw, broken. He didn't turn around. "I need to know why." Eleanor closed her eyes. She had practiced this answer 1,000 times, in 1,000 sleepless nights. She had rehearsed the words, polished them, made them sound reasonable. But now, facing his back, facing the truth, all those careful explanations crumbled. "I was 33, she began. Her voice was barely audible. "Your father and I, we were getting divorced. It was ugly. We were ugly. And I was alone, and scared, and broke, and everyone kept telling me I couldn't do it. Couldn't raise a child alone. Couldn't give you the life you deserved." He didn't move. Didn't speak. "They said you deserved better. 2 parents. A home. Stability." She pressed a hand to her chest, trying to contain the pain. "And I believed them. I was so young, and so tired, and I believed them. So you gave me away. Flat. Empty. I gave you to people who could love you the way you deserved." Tears streamed down her face now, hot and unstoppable. "I held you for 3 days. I sang to you. I counted your fingers and your toes and I memorized every single one. And then I signed the papers and I walked out into the cold and I have thought about you every single day since." He turned then. His face was wet too. "Every day," she repeated. "Every birthday. Every holiday. Every time I saw a mother with a child. Every time I closed my eyes. You were there. You've always been there." He stared at her for a long moment. Then he looked down at the photograph again, at the baby in her arms, at the woman she had been. "Did you ever try to find me?" The question broke something in her. "No." She whispered it. "Ashamed. I was too afraid. Too ashamed. I told myself you were happy. I told myself you didn't need me. I told myself 1,000 lies because the truth was too heavy to carry. But you kept this." He held up the photograph. "For 20 years. You kept this. I could never throw it away. It was the only proof I had that you were real. That you existed. That I hadn't imagined the whole thing." He moved then. Slowly. He crossed the room and sat on the coffee table directly in front of her, close enough to touch. He didn't touch her. But he was there, present, real, and she could see him clearly now, every detail, every feature, every piece of herself reflected in his face. "Tell me about him," he said quietly. "My father. Is he?" "Marcus." The name fell between them like a stone. Alex's eyes widened. "Marcus. Marcus, our CEO. Marcus who hired me." She nodded, unable to speak. "He knew." Alex's voice rose slightly. "He knew who I was. He brought me here knowing. He wanted to see you. He wanted to know you. We both," she stopped, swallowed. "We both made terrible choices. We both lived with the consequences. But Marcus, he couldn't let go either. He found you, tracked your career, made sure you ended up here." Alex stood abruptly, paced, ran his hands through his hair the way she had seen him do in a dozen meetings, the way she had done herself 1,000 times. "This whole time," he muttered, "this whole time I've been reporting to my father, sitting in meetings with my mother, presenting my ideas to the people who—" He stopped, pressed his palms against his eyes. "Alex. Don't." His voice was sharp, then softer. "Don't. Please. I need a minute." She waited. The storm howled. The emergency lights flickered, and she watched her son pace the office like a caged animal, trying to process the impossible. Finally, he stopped, faced her. The adoption agency said my birth mother was young. Too young to keep me. That's what they told my parents. That's what I grew up believing. His voice shook. You were 33. That's not young. That's not a teenager who made a mistake. That's a woman who made a choice. It was the wrong choice. Was it? He laughed, but there was no humor in it. I had a good life. Great parents. A sister I love. A childhood full of soccer games and school plays and family vacations. If you had kept me, I wouldn't have had any of that. The words were true. They were also devastating. I know, she whispered. I know you had a good life. I prayed for that every night. That you would be happy. That you would be loved. That you would never wonder if I wanted you. But I did wonder. His voice broke. Every kid who's adopted wonders. Every kid asks themselves why they weren't good enough to keep. My parents told me it wasn't about me. It was about you, about whatever you were going through. But you still wonder. You still carry that little voice that says maybe, just maybe, there was something wrong with you. She stood then, moved toward him, stopped when they were inches apart. There was nothing wrong with you. Her voice was fierce now. Fierce with 20 years of love she had never been able to express. You were perfect. You were the most perfect thing I had ever seen. And letting you go was the hardest thing I have ever done, harder than anything before or since, and I have never stopped loving you for a single second. He stared at her. His chest rose and fell rapidly. She could see the war inside him, the anger and the longing, the betrayal and the need, the son who had been abandoned and the man who stood before her now. Say it, he whispered. Say it again. Say what? What you haven't said. What I need to hear. She understood. She reached up, slowly, giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Her hand touched his face, his cheek, his jaw, the shape of him she had imagined for 20 years. I'm your mother, she whispered. I'm your mother, and I love you, and I am so sorry I wasn't brave enough to keep you. He closed his eyes, leaned into her touch for just a moment, a heartbeat, a breath, a lifetime. Then he pulled away. He walked back to the window. She stayed where she was, her hand still raised, her heart still pounding. I don't know what to do with this, he said quietly. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. Angry, grateful, confused. All of it. All of it is allowed. He turned, looked at her, really looked, the way he had been looking for weeks without understanding why. Is that why you stayed so late? Is that why you were always there, always watching, always knowing the right thing to say? His voice cracked. You've been my mother for weeks, and I didn't even know it. I've been your mother for 32 years, she said. You just didn't know my face. He absorbed that, nodded slowly. My fiancé, he said. My wedding. My whole life, you've missed all of it. I know. And you'll miss the rest of it too. His voice hardened slightly. Because I can't, I don't know if I can. I know. She held up a hand, stopping him. I know. I didn't tell you this because I wanted anything from you. I didn't tell you because I hoped you would call me Mom or invite me to Thanksgiving. I told you because you asked, and because you deserved the truth, and because I was tired of lying to your face every single day. He stared at her for a long moment. Then, slowly, he looked down at the photograph still in his hand. Can I keep this? His voice was small, young, the voice of a boy asking for something precious. She nodded, unable to speak. He slipped it into his pocket, close to his heart. The lights flickered, hummed, came back on. The storm was ending. They stood there, mother and son, in the harsh fluorescent light of his office, and neither of them knew what came next. Finally, Alex spoke. I don't know what happens tomorrow. I don't know how I'm supposed to be in meetings with you, or with Marcus, or with anyone. I don't know if I can ever call you Mom or if I even want to. He paused. But tonight I just need to sit with this. Alone. She nodded. I understand. She gathered her things, walked to the door, paused with her hand on the frame. Alex. He looked up. I'm so proud of you. Her voice shook, but she held his gaze. I've watched you for weeks, and I've seen how you treat people, how you lead, how you care. And I am so proud of the man you've become. I had nothing to do with it. But I am so proud. He didn't answer. But something shifted in his face. Something soft. Something wounded. Something that might, eventually, begin to heal. She walked out into the empty hallway, into the elevator, into the cold Chicago night. Behind her, in his office, Alex sat down on the couch and pulled out the photograph. He stared at it for a long time, at the woman holding him, at the baby in her arms, at the love in her eyes that 20 years and 1,000 miles had never diminished. And for the first time since he was old enough to wonder, he didn't feel like a boy who had been abandoned. He felt like a son who had finally been found. The days after the storm passed in a strange, suspended silence. Eleanor came to work. She attended meetings. She reviewed documents. She did her job with the same precision she had maintained for 30 years. But she moved through the office like a ghost, unseen, untouchable, waiting for something she couldn't name. Alex didn't come to her office. He didn't call her into his. They passed in hallways, nodded politely, continued walking. Professional. Distant. Appropriate. It was exactly what she had expected. Exactly what she deserved. But it was destroying her. Thursday afternoon. 4 days before Christmas. The office was half empty, people taking vacation days, escaping to families and warm destinations. Eleanor sat at her desk, staring at a spreadsheet she hadn't touched in an hour, when her phone buzzed. Alex Vance. My office. 5 p.m. Please come. 3 sentences. No warmth. No explanation. But the word please held her like a hand reaching through fog. She arrived at 4:55. The door was open. He was standing at the window, back to her, silhouetted against the grey December sky. The photograph was on his desk. Her photograph. The one she had kept for 20 years. Close the door, he said quietly. She did. She stood just inside, waiting, heart pounding. He turned. His face was tired. Dark circles under his eyes. He looked like he hadn't slept in days. She knew the feeling. I've been thinking, he said. About what you said. About everything. He paused. I talked to my parents. My adoptive parents. Eleanor's breath caught. How? How did they react? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. My mom cried. Not sad tears. Happy tears. She said she'd been praying for this moment since the day they brought me home. He shook his head slowly. She told me to be gentle with you. She said giving a child away isn't something you do because you don't love them. It's something you do because you love them too much to be selfish. The words landed like a blow. Eleanor pressed a hand to her chest, trying to hold herself together. She sounds remarkable. She is. He looked at her for a long moment. She also said something else. She said I should ask you the question I've been too afraid to ask. And what's that? He moved closer. Not too close. Just close enough to see her clearly. Did you want to keep me? The question was simple. Devastating. She had asked herself the same thing 1,000,000 times. Yes. Her voice broke on the word. God, yes. I wanted to keep you more than I've ever wanted anything. I wanted to take you home and watch you grow and be your mother every single day. But I was so afraid. Afraid I couldn't do it alone. Afraid I would fail you. Afraid you would grow up and resent me the way I resented my own mother for struggling, for always struggling. He listened. Didn't interrupt. Didn't look away. I chose wrong, she continued, tears streaming now. I chose fear over faith. I chose the safe path over the hard one. And I have regretted it every day of my life. Not because you didn't have a good life. You did, and I'm grateful for that, but because I missed everything. Every single thing. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. I want to show you something. He scrolled through photos, turned the screen toward her. A little boy. Dark hair. Gap-toothed smile. Holding a soccer ball. That's me. Age 7. My first goal. She couldn't breathe. She took the phone like it was made of glass, scrolling with trembling fingers. Age 9. Birthday party. Cake smeared across his face. Age 12. School play. Dressed as a tree, grinning. Age 16. Prom. Awkward tuxedo, beautiful girl on his arm. Age 22. Graduation. Holding a diploma, beaming. Age 28. Engagement. Red-haired woman, beach sunset, ring. Page after page of a life she had never seen. A childhood she had never witnessed. Moments she had only imagined. I'm not showing you this to hurt you, he said quietly. I'm showing you because I want you to know. I want you to see what you missed, yes. But I also want you to see that it was okay. I was okay. I was loved. I was happy. She looked up at him, tears blurring her vision. I know, she whispered. I prayed for that. Every night. He nodded slowly. Then he took the phone back, scrolled to the end, and turned it toward her again. A photo of him now. Same dark hair, same warm eyes. Standing with his fiancée, his adoptive parents, his sister. All of them smiling. All of them together. This is my family, he said. The ones who raised me. The ones who loved me into who I am. She nodded. Swallowed. They are beautiful. They are. He paused. But they're not the whole story. He set the phone down and picked up the photograph from his desk. Her photograph, the one she had kept for 20 years. You're part of the story too, he said. You've always been part of the story. I just didn't know it until now. She waited, afraid to hope. I don't know what this looks like, he continued. I don't know if I can ever call you Mom. I don't know if we'll ever have a normal relationship. But I know that you've been in this building for weeks, watching me, protecting me, caring about me, and I didn't even know it. And now that I do know. He trailed off. Swallowed. Now that I know, I can't just pretend you're a colleague. I can't go back to meetings and budgets and pretending you're just another employee. What do you want to do? Her voice was barely audible. He looked at her for a long moment. Then he did something she never expected. He sat down on the floor. Right there, in his executive office, in his tailored suit, he sat cross-legged on the carpet like a child. I don't know, he said honestly. I don't know what I want. I don't know what I'm supposed to feel. But I know I can't stand up right now. I know I need to just be here. With you. She stared at him for a heartbeat. 2. Then, slowly, she lowered herself to the floor across from him. The expensive carpet. The emergency lighting still dim from the storm days ago. Mother and son, sitting on the ground, finally still. They sat in silence for a long time. The city hummed below them. The heating system clicked on and off. The photograph lay on the desk, watching over them. Finally, Alex spoke. All my life, he said quietly, I thought I wasn't wanted. My parents told me I was. They told me my birth mother loved me. But there was always this voice. This little voice that said maybe they were just being nice. Maybe the truth was different. He looked at her. His eyes were her mother's eyes. His face was a face, 20 years younger, 30 years younger, a lifetime younger. Thank you, he said. For wanting me. For loving me. For keeping that photograph all these years. She reached across the space between them. Slowly. Giving him time to pull away. He didn't. Her hand touched his. Just fingers. Just contact. Just the first touch since she had held him in that hospital room, 20 years ago, and said goodbye. I loved you before you were born, she whispered. I loved you the first time I felt you move. I loved you the first time I held you. I loved you when I let you go. And I love you now, sitting on this floor, not knowing what comes next. I love you. That's the only thing that's never changed. He looked at their hands. His fingers curled around hers. I don't forgive you, he said quietly. Not yet. I don't know if I ever will. But I don't hate you either. I don't think I could. That's enough, she said. That's more than I deserve. He shook his head slowly. You don't get to decide what you deserve. Not anymore. That's not how this works. A small sound escaped her. Not quite a laugh. Not quite a sob. Something in between. How does it work? She asked. He thought about it. Looked at their hands again. Looked at her face. I don't know, he admitted. I think we figure it out. One day at a time. One conversation at a time. He paused. If you want to. More than anything. He nodded. Squeezed her hand once. Let go. They sat there for a while longer, neither speaking, neither moving. The city darkened outside. The office grew quiet. And somewhere in the silence, something shifted, not healed, not fixed, but acknowledged. Seen. Real. Eventually, he stood. Offered her his hand. Helped her up. I should go, he said. My fiancé is waiting. We have dinner plans with my parents, my adoptive parents. He paused. Maybe someday you could meet them. If you wanted. She nodded, not trusting her voice. He walked to the door. Paused with his hand on the frame. Turned back. Eleanor. She looked up. Thank you for finding that problem with the Meridian deal. You saved me. A small smile. You've been saving me for weeks, and I didn't even know it. It's what mothers do, she said quietly. Even the ones who aren't there. He held her gaze for a long moment. Then he nodded once and walked out. She stood alone in his office, surrounded by his things, his life, his world. The photograph was still on his desk. He had left it there. For her. For himself? She didn't know. She picked it up. Looked at her younger face. Looked at the baby in her arms. Looked at the love that had never faded, never faltered, never failed. Then she placed it carefully back on his desk. Where it belonged. Where he could find it whenever he needed to remember. She walked out of his office. Down the hallway. Into the elevator. Out into the cold December night. The city sparkled with Christmas lights. Snow fell softly. And somewhere behind her, in a building full of strangers and secrets, her son was beginning to learn her name. Not Eleanor Price. Not the executive. Not the colleague. Just Eleanor. Just mother. Just the beginning of something that might, someday, become a family. 6 months later, Eleanor received an invitation in the mail. Heavy cream paper. Gold lettering. Mr. Alexander Vance and Dr. Sarah Mitchell request the pleasure of your company at their wedding. Beneath the printed text, in handwriting she didn't recognize, someone had added a note. +1. Bring Marcus if you want. But come. There's a seat saved for you. Near the front. Where family sits. Eleanor held the invitation for a long time. Then she placed it on her nightstand, next to her bed, where she could see it every night before she slept. She still didn't know what came next. She still didn't know if forgiveness was possible. She still didn't know if she would ever hear him call her mom. But she knew one thing for certain. She would be at that wedding. She would sit in that seat. She would watch her son marry the woman he loved. And for the first time in 20 years, she wouldn't be watching from a distance. She would be exactly where she belonged.